All right, so carrying on off of the 32X and kind of just segueing back just a shade. So during that time of the 32X's demise was also when Sony was about to introduce the PlayStation, and before that happened, which the crazy history behind this for those of you guys that may or may not know this, that PlayStation was actually a developer company that was working with Nintendo to develop their own, I guess you could call it the SNES CD, because that was supposed to be the competition for the Sega CD. But due to they had their differences, surprise, surprise. So PlayStation decided to say, you know what, screw it. How about we just make our own console? And then they ended up partnering with Sony, which then created the Sony PlayStation.
It's one of those. What's the meme in Spider-Man? It's a canon event.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like I can only imagine what the landscape would be like if that had actually went through and we had the Nintendo PlayStation. Would Sony even bother making a console? And if they did, would it have the same appeal as
I-
the PlayStation has in the current timeline? Like, I wonder what
I'm not
that would
saying
have
they
been like.
wouldn't, but the thing that I look at how I mean I could be wrong. This is all hypothetical. However, when you look at the library that was on the PlayStation 1, could you imagine that? If that would have been all shoved on, Nintendo's platform? I mean,
Yeah, that would have. I mean, given how
crazy.
things are now, it would have been better.
Yeah,
But that's if things played out the exact same way. But
exactly.
I don't know, like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro, Jack and Daxter all being Nintendo
Could you
properties.
imagine that? I mean, you just would have, they would have monopolized the marketplace at that point. Like,
Yeah, it just would have been assuming that if Sony still came out with a console at all.
yeah,
But uh, that's tough, man. That's
it is.
it's interesting to think about.
Oh yeah, I think that if they would have done that, they would have single-handedly. I don't know. I mean, had Sega still gone down the path they did, like when how they released the Saturn, how that was a debacle, and then the Dreamcast. I mean, I think that Nintendo definitely would have killed them. And at the time, I'm trying to remember the timeline here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Xbox wasn't released until was it 2001? The original Xbox?
Yeah, so 2001, 2002.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was trying to think. I think it was 2001 because I'm just trying to remember. I'm like, I know I was a sophomore in high school, so it was either late 2001 or somewhere around there, and like maybe it was early 2002, so somewhere around there. But nonetheless, I mean, it would have been very, very hard for Microsoft to come in trying to go against a hypothetical Nintendo that had everything, basically. They would have had a monopoly on the whole video game industry at that point.
Well, it's one thing to also consider because Nintendo is always like I said, the stubbornness is a strength and weakness.
Yeah.
So I wonder if if that relationship, if they have successfully went off for the Super NES CD-ROM or the Nintendo PlayStation,
Yeah.
would it have stayed that way? Would that relationship have stayed good, or would they eventually have been like, oh, let's do something weird like the GameCube?
Yeah.
And Philips and Sony was like, look, the little disc thing is cool, but we want to do this, and then Nintendo, for whatever reason, I wonder if that might have been the split, if it would have occurred, and maybe we just would have got a later version of the PlayStation around 6th gen. That would have been the PlayStation 1. And
Yeah.
then, would it have been back in generation? I don't know. But it's interesting to think about.
It really
It
is.
kind of,
There's a lot of ways that you could definitely argue one way or the other, but it definitely yeah, I could definitely see the hypothetical of maybe at some point there would have been a rift and they might have still potentially, veered off the path and decided to go do something on their own. All right, so going into the launch of the PlayStation, goes on. Sony released PlayStation in Japan on December 3rd of 1994, a week after the release of the Sega Saturn. at a price of 39,800 yen. It says sales in Japan began with a stunning success with long queues in shops. I don't know, is it Oga later recalled that he realized how important PlayStation had become for Sony when friends and relatives begged for consoles for their children. It's like, oh boy. PlayStation sold 100,000 units on the first day and 2 million units within 6 months. You know what that means? It's called word of mouth. And boy, was that important back in the day. And it spread like wildfire.
No stopping it, because when the PlayStation came out, it was you didn't need the internet.
No,
Once
no,
you
you
saw
didn't.
once you saw that icon, which is really cool. Like they're the logo, the P and the S. I still think that's probably one of the most unique looking logo designs anyone could have ever come up with.
Oh man, for sure. Like I've said it a million times. Like if there's ever one startup screen that gets me, like it just gives me all the feels, it's that PS1, man. It freaking hits every time. I'm like, man, it's just so good.
I was listening to it the other day when I was driving. I was just like, of course, turn up the the audio in the car,
Yeah.
the surround sound, and I was just like,
It's just like you hear that, you're like, oh, it's so good.
and I'm like, we had everything.
Oh man, it's so good. No, I totally get it, man.
Don't know what you're missing.
They don't.
You don't understand.
No.
You don't get it.
No, all they'll say is you're just an old man, get off my lawn. That's all you are. Goes on to say, although the Saturn outsold the PlayStation in the first few weeks due to the success of Virtua Fighter, by the end of '94, 300,000 PlayStation units were sold in Japan compared to 500,000 Saturn units. A gray market emerged for PlayStations shipped from Japan to North America and Europe, with buyers of such consoles paying up to 700, I believe that is euros. As before the release in North America, Sega and Sony presented their consoles at the first the E3 in Los Angeles on May 11th of 95. At their keynote presentation, Sega of America CEO Tom Kalinske revealed that its Saturn console would be released immediately to select retailers at a huge price of $399. Next came Sony's turn. Olafson, the head of SCEA, summoned Steve Race, the head of development, to the conference stage, who said $299 and left the audience with a round of applause. Could you imagine that? It's like mic drop. $299. Bye-bye. Farewell.
And what's funny is that that tradition would continue decades later with the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4.
Yeah.
Like, cause I think when the whole what do you call it? Whatever the little camera thing that Microsoft was trying to ship, and everyone was like, "This thing costs $500," and then Sony came out with like $499 or $399 for the PlayStation 4, and everyone was like, "Wow!"
Yeah.
Like, when I saw this, because I saw that video for the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation, I was like, "So this has just been a thing."
Oh yeah, and it actually, even before that, like it was the Genesis. So because Genesis's biggest thing was like, why would you pay $200 for the SNES when you can pay $100 and whatever the hell it was for the Genesis? You know what I mean? So it's like, boy, how'd that blow up in your face, Sega? You dropped the hammer like, yeah, $400, and then PlayStation's like, yeah, how about $299? Aw,
and then walk off the
and then
stage.
just walk off. Oh man, that's all you had to do, just say $299. Like that's just like, dang, dude. Mic drop.
The Sega guy after that was like, "You son of a."
Oh yeah, yeah, because I guarantee when he first walked off stage, he's like, "Ho ho ho! I did so well, $399," and then that guy came up and just kicked him right in the nuts.
And everybody cheered.
Oh yeah, they're like,
I sat there and talked for 10 minutes trying to sell this Sega, and this guy just said a number.
He just said
left.
$299 and just totally contradicted everything I said. Goes on to say the attention to the Sony conference was further bolstered by the surprise appearance of Michael Jackson and the showcase of highly anticipated games, including Wipeout, Ridge Racer, and Tekken. In addition, Sony announced that no games would be bundled with the console, which I even do remember that. I remember getting a PlayStation. Trying to remember, I got it. It would have been Christmas of '98. Yeah, because I was in the 7th grade. So yeah, that was Christmas of '98. So, but I remember getting it, and it didn't. I don't think that one came with any. It came with a demo disc, I think. The one that I got, I think it came with a demo disc, but it didn't come with any full packaged game or anything like that. Yeah, it did come with a demo disc because I remember playing Hot Shots, the golf game. I remember playing that in a Pitfall game.
Yeah, when we got one, I think our aunt or uncle bought us one, and it came with a demo disc. And of course, my parents, they didn't understand that we had to buy more stuff in order for the game to work.
Yeah,
Buy some actual games.
yeah.
And yeah, man, I remember that demo disc. It was like black and red. Holy smokes, that was, man.
It's funny how that stuff happens. You know what I mean? You start thinking, it's just like, where'd that come from?
Yeah, there's a lot. I'm gonna have to look that up later because now there's some games on there because it took us a while before we could get our first actual game.
Yeah.
And so me and my brother, we just played the hell out of that demo disc. I remember Tekken 2 was on it for sure, and it was this other game. I gotta look it up because now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, man, that was some cool games. I need to figure out what the name of those were.
So all those Saturn had released early in the United States to gain an advantage over the PlayStation. The surprise launch upset many retailers who were not informed in time, harming sales. Some retailers, such as KB Toys, responded by dropping the Saturn entirely. The PlayStation went on sale in North America on September 9th of 1995. It sold more units within 2 days than the Saturn had in 5 months. That is freaking crazy. Dang. That's when you know, my God. With almost all of the initial shipments of 100,000 units sold in advance and shops across the country running out of consoles and accessories. The well-received Ridge Racer contributed to the PlayStation's early success, with some critics considering it superior to Sega's arcade counterpart Daytona USA. There were over 100,000 pre-orders placed and 17 games available on the market by the time of the PlayStation's American launch in comparison to Saturn's 6 launch games. Because again, for those that did not know, Saturn was not even remotely ready technically for launch, which, as we know, contributed to its demise with a bunch of rushed, non-finished games like Clockwork Knight. Was not meant to be 2 games. It was supposed to be 1 game, but they released it as 2 games just because they wanted to give the customer something. So Clockwork Knight was actually the first half of the game, and Clockwork Knight 2 was just the second half of the game, not a second game separately, for those that did not know that. Goes on to say the PlayStation released in Europe on the 29th of September in 95 and in Australia on November 15th of 95. By November, it had already outsold the Saturn by 3-1 in the UK, where Sony had allocated a €20 million marketing budget during the Christmas season compared to Sega's $4 million. Sony found early success in the UK by securing listings with independent shop owners as well as prominent high street chains such as Comet and Argos. Within its first year, the PlayStation secured over 20% of the entire American video game market. From September to the end of 95, sales in the US amounted to 800,000 units, giving the PlayStation a commanding lead over other 5th-gen consoles. Though the SNES and Mega Drive from the 4th gen still outsold it. Sony reported that the attach rate of sold games and consoles was 4-1. To meet increasing demand, Sony chartered jumbo jets and ramped up production in Europe and North America. By early 96, the PlayStation had grossed $2 billion, equal to $3.885 billion to 2023 standards, from worldwide hardware and software sales. By late 96, sales in Europe totaled 2.2 million units, including 700,000 in the UK. Approximately 400 PlayStation games were in development compared to around 200 being developed for the Saturn and only 60 for the N64. So, segueing, before we talk about the 64 and talk a little bit more about the Saturn, what was your initial introduction to the PlayStation? Was it through anybody you knew? Was it through emulation?
When it came to the first PlayStation, the earliest memory I have of it is that I don't think me and my brother were aware of it until we actually saw it,
Okay.
because a family member had got it for us. Because at that point our parents were like, "Look, these video games are getting out of hand. Y'all need to read a book." And so we
Yeah.
were just like, "Well, we're stuck with a Genesis and a NES." But when we found out, because I remember the PlayStation came in the gray box, and it was a
Yep.
really sexy box.
I love
And
that box. I thought it looked sweet. I know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah, and like my mom, she asked me to get something out of her closet, and I looked, and when I moved the,
There it
I
was.
yeah, I saw. I was like, I wasn't supposed to see that. But yeah, we had a good number of games. We eventually got a multi tap because we had three younger brothers behind me and my older brother that allowed us to play Crash Team Racing 4 player. And this is a kind of a sad story, but it kind of worked out. But we lost a Spyro game as a result. One of my friends was telling us about this game called Final Fantasy VII,
Oh yeah.
and we didn't know anything about this. Like, we never played a JRPG up to this point. So he was like, "Hey, I'll trade you my Final Fantasy VII for your Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage." We loved Ripto's Rage, so we were like, "You know what? Because you cool." His name was Boo Boo. I'll
Damn
never
boo
forget
boo.
you, man.
Gosh damn boo boo.
Yeah. But so we made the trade because me and my brother were like, okay, maybe it's a multiplayer game. He didn't tell us anything about this game,
Yeah.
so we traded. We traded Ripto's Rage for disc one of Final Fantasy VII. We didn't know it was like a game that went more than
Oh
one disc,
no.
so that bastard tricked us.
Oh
But
man. That's
we were bummed about it, and so we were gonna confront him about it. He moved.
oh
Like,
man. He knew he done got
so
you.
yeah, so we were mad about that for a while, but eventually we was like, you know what, let's just play this game and see what's going on. And then we got into it because it's an amazing game. And so after a while, we kind of got over the fact that, like, okay, we got bamboozled, but we really are liking this game. It's long, and we've never played a narrative-based game this deep and
Until
this
you finish
cool.
disc one.
Yeah, and then once we finished, I was like, wow, can't wait for the second part of this game to come out. Insert disc two. I was like, huh?
uh
Did some research, and now we got
whoops.
mad at him all over again.
That
Like, that bastard, he only gave us one
bastard.
disc. So, like, thank you, Boo Boo, for getting us into Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
F you, Boo Boo, for like stealing our Ripto's Rage, which was
Yeah.
a freaking awesome game, by the way. It was one of our favorite games. Anyway, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
No, you're good. No, I get it. I get it. I'll never forget. For me, I know. For those that have followed me, have heard me probably say this story a million times on stream because it's gotten brought up by people that don't know anything about me, because it's not like I'm trying to act like I'm a somebody, but I'm sure that those that have followed me for a while are probably tired of hearing this story. But I was in the 6th grade, so this would have been 97. Yeah. I was trying to think to myself, like, 97, yeah. So, yeah, 97 going into 98, somewhere on there. Or maybe, no, it was late 98 because it was towards the end of the school year. So, yeah. So this kid, he brought in a PlayStation because it was like towards the end of the school year and it was just like a screw off day, right? Like the teacher's like, hey, just bring in whatever. He brings this freaking PlayStation and I ain't never seen one. and I was never hip to really keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak, on video games because I didn't have access to the video game magazines unless I knew somebody who had one, which was very, very rare. So a lot of the stuff that I heard was always hearsay. And I heard about a PlayStation. I heard they looked cool, but I never seen anything, no demo, no nothing. This kid comes in, freaking, everyone's looking at him like he's got the Holy Grail, like, oh, and I'm like, what is this magical box? And, and I thought it looked sweet. I'm like, oh man, this thing looks awesome. It puts on Crash Bandicoot. My mind was just, I was like, man, this is nuts. And I always do this as the running joke. I was like, this is what me and my buddies would always say. It's like, it don't get much better than this. It is peaked. Right now. Exactly. It's like, that's how I was like, oh my God, it don't get better than this. Look at them graphics. And to today's standards, people are like, yeah, it looks jank as hell. But back then you got to remember, people, you went from the paper 2D era to that. And for as much crap as people give on the polygon era, it really wasn't that bad for the first gen of 3D models. I thought they actually did a very good job of execution because you got to start somewhere. It's definitely better than going from the Atari, solid color BS that you got colors that bleed together and it looks like garbage to, going from that to like Master System and NES. At least you had like with the polygon era, it didn't look like complete trash and it was palatable. And for the most part, it still has aged well to today's standards, in my opinion. I think it looks really good even to today's standards and it does play well. And I mean, the colors, like I said, with Crash, I love the colors like the Wampa fruits that I always referred to as mangoes as a kid. Like the colors, just watching them swirl around and seeing the colors and stuff. And the sound it made when you collected them, just like every little thing about it, I was just like, I gotta get this damn thing. That one game had me sold so damn hard. And then the controller, being a kid and I seen that, I was like, wow, I really like this controller. And mind you, I was a Genesis kid, so I liked the Genesis controller, but when I played that, I was like, get me this thing. Sega what? Get me a PlayStation, man.
And the thing is about the generational leap in terms of like graphics and like technology, it was very jarring because we were going from one plane to another.
Yeah.
And I do think like all the PlayStation games I've ever played looked phenomenal, especially because when we played Final Fantasy VII, we thought it looked weird until we got into a battle. Like when the battle started, I was like, the game just turned into like super HD realistic.
Oh
yeah,
like, yeah.
That's what he looks like.
Yep.
And because like we were used to like Spyro, because like when Cloud first hopped off the train, I was like, yo, his arms look mad silly, bro.
Yeah.
But well, when the battle started, and a lot of the games, it's like the 3D jump was way more impressive than I think we give it credit for.
Right.
Super Retro Force.